any closeness for the vicinity, they were assembled in the chapel and were reciting this aloud, not believing in it, and nobody requested it from them, but giving the impression that they were Roman Catholic priests or Roman Catholic nuns. And then, of course, they had to be provided with food and everything, because they had nothing, they had no ration cards, and there was real hunger here in Italy. So to provide them with food was another serious problem for the Pope. To provide thousands of people with extra food without rations was a problem.
This is, brings me to another point here, that there has always been a notion. In fact, in Yad Vashem, the placard states that it was because of the Pope's silence that it was left up to all of the European bishops and individual priests to act independently from the apostolic household, and universally sheltered as many Jews as possible during the war. Would you comment on this? I mean, the entire notion that all of this sheltering took place and all of the care took place without even only happened at the individual initiative of each
priest. If you allow me to use a very strong term, it is simply nonsense. Take, for example, before all these problems started, before the German occupation of Rome, in the Palatine Guard, the noble guard, there were about 200, maximum 300 people. At the end of 43, there were nearly 4,000 people in there. 400 demonstrably Jewish. 200 lived permanently in the Vatican. The other 200 lived outside the Vatican because there was no accommodation. The Vatican is very small, but they had official documents that they were at the service of the Vatican, therefore came under the international protection. That's, nobody can say that this was an initiative which could have been done without the Pope. And it is well known that many Jewish people, besides these 400, took refuge in the Vatican. The other thing, of course, is this: there is clear evidence, and we know the names of people who went around and alerted all the heads of the Roman houses here in Rome. I'm speaking to churches, parishes, ecclesiastical convents, and there are plenty, houses of students, universities, etc., etc., alerted them that it was the formal will of the Pope to help these Jewish persecuted people as much as possible. One, for example, is a Monsignor O'Flaherty, another was the person which I already mentioned, Father Pankratius Pfeiffer, another was Father Weber of the Palatine Fathers, and there is plenty of evidence of that. So how can they say a thing like that? All these people have spoken out. Of course, a Jewish scholar, Dr. Susan Zuccotti, has said the Pope didn't know anything about it, he didn't do anything. Reason, there is no written document that he ordered it. Now, this argument, excuse me, is downright stupid, because there is no written document signed by Hitler ordering the Holocaust. And this was the reason why a Holocaust denier, like David Irwin, claimed the Holocaust had never taken place. He said this could not have taken place without a written order of Hitler. There is no written order by Hitler, therefore the Holocaust didn't take place, which of course is downright foolish. But to apply now such a foolish argument, which has been refuted, first of all by Jewish, and rightly so by Jewish authors, now you apply this, there is no written document. Why is there no written document? Well, anybody who has lived under that period, even as a boy I knew this, I had to be very careful not put writing anything. If there would have been a written document, and this would have been spread all over, a person who was going on the street could at any moment be stopped by the SS if it was known that he came from the Vatican, because the Vatican was surrounded by troops, at least by individual people, parachutists. So he could have been stopped. If he had found that paper on him, what would happen to it? What would happen to the church? If it would have been found in a convent, well, it was always, the possibility was always very great that these convents be invaded by this. In a certain instance, it did happen. It did happen in St. Paul, it did happen in one of our colleges, the Oriental College. They invaded it and found certain Jews and arrested them, and people were punished for that. Because harboring a Jew and sheltering a Jew was punishable by death. A number of people in Germany who sheltered Jews, and here were killed for that very reason. And this is one of the things that Sir Martin Gilbert, his famous Jewish scholar, pointed out. He said, well, I personally am not absolutely sure whether I would have opened my door. And these are decisions, some people, of course, nowadays are very easy. If I had lived at him, I would have done this, that, and the other. This has happened to me, and I always look at these people and said, look, I have neither the right nor the intention to question what you are saying. But please remember, you haven't as yet not looked into the eye of death as I did under the Nazi regime. It is only at those moments that you can demonstrate what you are saying. And I hope for you that you will never be placed in such a situation. And then they are becoming a little bit more reflecting.
There's some information that I discovered that I'd like to ask you about. Sister Pasqualina, who was the nun in charge of in the papal household. I was told that, and maybe you could verify this, that she was actually sort of running a group of little trucks.
Before discussing and answering your question directly, it may be useful to tell you how I came to know Sister Pasqualina and what kind of relationship I had with her. It became, during the years, very intense, because that will substantiate what I'm going to say and the truthfulness of what I'm going to say. In high school, I jumped 2 classes, and I did the final examination when I was barely 17. From there, I went immediately to university, and at the age of 20, I was master in philosophy, doctor in philosophy. So I joined the society only then, at the end of the war, because during the war it would have been too dangerous for them, not for me, to enter them. After the 2 years novitiate, I was sent as a teacher to the Dutch college in Amsterdam, College St. Ignatius of Society. And suddenly a telegram arrived to the rector that I should immediately, within 3 days, be in Rome to take the place of a teacher of philosophy, 45 years old, who at the beginning of the academic year had become so ill that he could not be replaced, and it was obvious that he could not resume his activity ever. Now, it was very unusual that so young a person was called over to Rome, but we had no passports. All the passports issued in Germany before the end of the war had been declared invalid. So nobody could come from Germany, Austria, etc. I was living in Holland, and in Holland there was a diplomatic representation of the Holy See, an apostolic nuncio, which in Germany did simply not exist in 1947. So I got a Vatican passport when I was sent to Rome and took up my task over here. I was also acting at the same time as secretary of the rector of this pontifical college, and it was in that capacity that I got an internal phone call to go down to the parlor to see what a sister wanted. Now, this was normal. Many people came in to ask for food or anything like it, so I usually was in charge of that. Now, I met this sister, and she presented herself as being Sister Pasqualina, the housekeeper from Pope Pius XII, and that she came in that capacity. And she said, the Pope has sent me here. I wanted to speak to the rector. Now speaking to you, he bluntly said, you seem to be extremely young, which was true. So I said, well, this person is very direct to say a thing like that to your face. And she said, well, I really come to ask whether in your library you have a given book. And she gave me the title. I said, well, I am very new here. I have to go up and see it. And what do you want with it? The Pope wants it. Because she told me that the Pope had a fabulous memory, which I later could see by myself. When he was apostolic nuncio in Germany, he remembered that he had read a book which he now wanted to quote in one of his speeches. But he had the habit never to quote anything unless he had seen the original text in front of him, never from second and third hand sources. So she asked me, he remembers exactly even the page where this is. Have you got the book? If so, could you lend it to the Pope? So I said, of course, if we have it. So I went up and we found it. That started a whole movement. Not every week, not even every month, but quite frequently.
She knew who you were.
And that's how I met her, and we became very friendly, etc., etc. When I had finished my task, 2 years period in the Pontifical German College, I studied 4 years in England, a further year in Spain, and then returned again to the college, but this time in a much higher capacity as acting prefect of studies. And we resumed our relationship, and this time she did not only ask books which were in our library, which was a very rich library, but whether through my personal relations I could obtain from national libraries in Germany certain books which were extremely rare. I asked her, well, the Pope has an apostolic nuncio in Germany. Isn't it simpler to do that? He said, no, he doesn't want to draw attention to the fact, and he doesn't want to deploy as nuncios to come begging for things like that. So he prefers a private channel. He knows your family. He knows that you are capable of doing it. Can you do it? I said, well, I try, and we did. Now, this became very much more frequent now. This is the beginning of the relationship. Occasionally, we had also little chat beyond. She was always in a hurry usually, but I asked her several things. But our relationship became extremely frequent after the death of the Pope. Because here something happened that should never have happened, but did happen, and not in a case only. I have observed now personally several times that as long as a secretary of a pope is acting, his master and lord is alive, people cater up to him. This is normal. It happens in other administrations as well. It shouldn't happen in the church, but it happens. And therefore, they want to get something, etc. They are polite, they're even cordial, at times servile. I've seen it myself. But when the Lord and Master died, the attitude changes. Then they are practically persecuted. This has happened to the private secretary of John the 23rd. It has happened to the private secretary of Paul VI. It has happened to Sister Pasqualina as householder of the papal union. She had a very difficult time. It was Cardinal Spellman who saved her by putting her in charge of the household in the Pontifical North American College here close by. But, of course, since we had met so frequently, she very frequently came to see me and I consoled her because she was highly sensitive about this shabby treatment that certain people gave her. And then she had time and I gave her time, and many things came out. And I asked her more specifically, because I was interested, what exactly she had experienced during the German occupation of Rome, being a German. And then she told me, among other things, and this is the exact answer to your question, that she herself drove around Rome with a little truck so as to provide foodstuffs, clothing, shoes, other things, other necessities, soap, even toilet paper, God knows what, everything these people needed because they had nothing. And the communities in which they're living had to live on their spare food and rations and other rations. Everything was rationed. Even in 47, when I came here, that was the case. So she told me that herself, without any pretense. She considered to be the most normal thing in the world. She was also put in charge by the Pope of the papal magazine. And this, you see, the papacy was neutral, the Vatican was neutral, and they got plenty of stuff from South America. Meat from the Argentine, saying that train loads full of material came in from Spain, from Portugal, and this could reach the Vatican. And the Vatican didn't use it for their own purposes. The Pope was extremely sober in eating, and he liked a cup of coffee in the morning. But since the Romans couldn't have coffee, and there were tons of coffee in the magazine, he renounced to take any coffee at all. He didn't want any heating because, well, the Roman people have it. He didn't take any holiday because they couldn't afford it. So it was not for him that all this food stuff came into the Vatican. It was to help those people who were starving. And to a large extent, it went exactly to the people who were persecuted, who were in hiding, who had nothing, and who could not be sufficiently fed, clad, etc., by the people who sheltered them. And she was instrumental. She was head of the magazine.
So this absolutely shows that the Pope at the time was directly involved with.
Yes, I think what else could you expect? I mean, this could not have happened in the Vatican without the Pope's knowledge, without his will. I mean, this is obvious. And she explained to me she never meddled into church politics, and the Pope would never have tolerated that, nor would she ever have dared to do this, because the Pope on this was extremely sensitive. And this never happened. But as far as the helping of people was concerned, she was put in charge of the magazine, and not all the monsignors liked it, because before she was appointed, many things disappeared from the magazine. Well, understandably, people had families in town and they were suffering hunger. I'm not criticizing them, I'm just stating the fact. But once she took in order, the thing was in order, nothing that appeared, because she was severe and precise. A typical German Bavarian precision, if you wish. And people didn't like it, and that caused many enemies for her. Yeah, sure. And later she had to pay for it.
We were also, I was told that the summer palace of the Holy Father, the Pope's palace at Castel Gandolfo, also had Jews sheltered there. Do you have any knowledge of this?
Yes, I investigated that. Especially, and here is a thing that as a trained historian, we don't want to put in our documents and investigating judge things that are not demonstrated. I had read in several publications, Catholic publications, that 3,000 Jews were sheltered at Castel Gandolfo. Now, I was a little bit hesitant to believe that. So I got in touch with the director of the time of Castel Gandolfo and said, can you confirm this? And he point blank said no. And he gave me the real story. What really happened was, there were some refugees in Castel Gandolfo, but not to that extent. But it so happened that when the Allied troops, American and English troops, were threatening to encircle Rome and were beginning to occupy the Albanian hills here, the German military command, not wanting to get these civilians implicated on a battlefield, ordered them to leave their villages within 3 hours' time. Now, where are these people supposed to go? Many of them decided to take refuge in exactly Castel Gandolfo. There was an iron gate still there, but they forced that, threw it down, pushing against it, and 3,000 people entered. Now, of course, nobody thought of driving them out. And a number of them perished because even though this was a papal domain, it was bombed twice with serious casualties. Now, can it be said that all these people were Jews? Definitely not. There may have been some, probably were some Jews between them, but nobody could tell me ever how many. Right. So that is an honest answer. We should not use arguments that are not correct and not demonstrable.
We've also learned through another Jewish journalist, a friend of ours, Mr. Dan Kurzman, who is a very, very competent journalist and had interviewed General Karl Wolff, who was the commandant to Italy, an assistant and deputy to Heinrich Himmler, about the plot to kidnap Pope Pius XII and the plan that this was an actual plan that Hitler